Eimear, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast. Your book, The Dodger and the Great Betrayal, DJ Carey. My God, like I don't think I've read a book. I can't remember the last time I read a book, but maybe it was Tony O'Reilly's. It was the postman that had stole the 1 million and gambled it all. Maybe that's the last time I think where my jaw was on the floor so much reading a book. But your book is just so incredibly researched, and I think at the start it feels like this most beautiful triumph. You know, a kind of small guy nearly, but just has such skill on the hurling field and goes on to into the pantheon, I suppose, of Irish sporting greats, and then it just slips into what can only be described as almost a Greek tragedy of betrayal and distrust and almost psychopathic behaviour. But before we get into all that, as I said, I kind of just want to understand. So your background is in journalism.
Sure is, Carey.
Wait, it's locally, is it? Or was it?
It is. It's funny you mentioned Tony O'Reilly. So I grew up in the same town as Tony, so I actually know him. Ireland is small, and that was another incredible story. So I'm a Carlow woman, so from a small town. Was interested in journalism, didn't know straight away maybe I wanted to be a journalist, but was very interested always in what was going on in my community and around me. So I started doing work experience and showing an interest in the local paper, the Carlow Nationalist, as a teenager later, in my late teens, say. Yeah. And then I studied journalism in DCU, and my first full-time job was actually in DJ Carey's local radio station, KCLR, Kilkenny Carlow Local Radio. So I started there as a news journalist, and then I went back into papers. So I've had a career, spent half of my career in newspapers, worked for the Irish Independent, came across DJ a lot. We'd say just on the periphery. I didn't have any personal relationship with him. I was in awe of him, thought he was a great guy, saw that he was in a relationship with Sarah Newman, and when I was working for the Indo, his business was in trouble at the time, DJ Carey Enterprises. So we're going back a bit, going back to 2009, 2010, 2011, he was on the scene with Sarah. They broke up in 2012. But I wrote about him and his business affairs a little bit over the years, and then he came on the local radio with me. I returned to radio actually in my 30s, from the time I was 30 up until very recent years. I worked there for a decade as the presenter of the talk show. So you get to talk to really interesting people. I wasn't, never been a sports journalist. I'm always news. So I like to investigate stories. I like to dig. I have an interest in politics and current affairs really, and news stuff. So I would have covered a lot of crime around the Midlands and the Southeast. But DJ Carey, I mean, you'd know this from growing up in the Midlands. He didn't need a surname. He was huge. So for your listeners on this pod that are all over the world, for people in the States, to us, like, he was like Tiger. He didn't need a surname. He was simply DJ. So his stature was massive, and that opened doors for him everywhere he went. So he had huge opportunities to make legit money. But the difference between himself and, say, an American superstar, he was playing an amateur sport. And Americans found this incredible. Like, he didn't get any wages for playing the game of hurling. It's an amateur sport. So that was a big difference.
And because I think even there's you write about a dinner in the book. I think it was hosted by JP McManus, where he was talking to Tiger Woods about, that they don't get paid. And I got the impression from, and especially in them early chapters, up to, say, chapter 5, like, where he really had this, like, maybe chip on his shoulder that it wasn't paid, that, like, there was an injustice, that there were, he was doing so much for the county, where you could definitely see the extrinsic motivating factors coming more maybe to the surface than just the purely intrinsic, that's, for the pride of the county, or for the, for club and county, all this. And I think that probably, like, again, not that I have a theory, or my theory would hold any weight, but it's like that carried over, like this, I need to get what I'm owed, nearly, and he took a horrible path to try do it anyway.
Yeah, a lot of people have said to me, things like, was there a sense of entitlement there? They'd ask questions like that, maybe. But DJ was different from a young age, and he was given special treatment. So while he was in an amateur world and an amateur sport, I mentioned all the doors open for him. There was a lot of opportunities there to legitimately make serious money.
Yeah.
Corporate Ireland, he wanted him, and he was there at the start of kind of the proper rise of the celebrity, you might say, in the 1990s, when we started to pay closer attention to this kind of stuff, and media, Guinness moved in and were sponsoring the championship. There was incredible, very glossy ads at the time. Like, DJ was on bus stops, his face was everywhere. He got involved with the Gaelic Players Association in the early days when it was founded. And previous to that, he had been on the Players Committee, say, for the GAA. But that wouldn't have had as much clout or weight. The players wanted proper recognition for some of these endorsement deals, and that at times could put you on a collision course with corporate Croke Park, because they were also trying to get money from sponsorship. But the players felt, and DJ was not shy in coming forward about that, he felt that players should get something if their face was going to be on brands and all of that. So money did matter to DJ, and he mentioned it many times in his interviews. And in fact, DJ Carey, while he didn't cooperate in any way with my investigation, he is one of my greatest sources, because he talked so freely over the years. He gave so many interviews, very accessible to media. He made a documentary himself years ago. He wrote a book with Martin Breheny, his autobiography, but also, even since he was young, huge number of accounts in local papers and national papers. And he mentioned money many times.
Yeah, and you almost feel as well he was very open to the media, but there was this, I suppose, begrudging kind of aspect as well, because he wasn't able to control maybe what was being written. If there was, with his first wife, when there was maybe tension, or people were probably, maybe there was the gossip mill was turning, that there was trouble brewing, and he was kind of snapping at the media a lot. You really kind of got this almost battle between him and the media, or to control the narrative, which sometimes you can't, and especially for someone in his with his notoriety, because it would have been such a like, obviously we have kind of clickbait, but like maybe page turner, people would buy the paper to see what's DJ up to, what's happened, like nationally and locally, I'd say.
If you had DJ on a front page, he sold newspapers. Like, there is no doubt about that. His name carried a lot of weight, and even one of the first big stories I wrote for The Independent, when I think about it now, like, it's extraordinary, the information that was swirling about DJ's health, because one of the big stories I wrote for them, I think, was in 2012. It was it was around, I would say, the spring summer of 2012, sometime after his breakup with Sarah Newman. The story was about DJ's fears over the blood clots on his brain, and that he had been to the US for treatment for these brain aneurysms. And at the time, I had a good source that said to me that he was telling everybody in a corporate box in Croke Park that he had this surgery in the US, and he was pointing to marks on his head. So there were lots of things there as a young journalist that I suppose when it comes to somebody's health, you accept their bona fides if they're telling you, or if they're telling the people around them, that they're going to America for treatment. Like, DJ did this very brazenly and very openly. He spoke about his health on the Late Late Show to a national audience. There was a fascinating interview he gave to the national airwaves to Ray Darcy at the time on RTE, and the stuff he said, I mean, he never used the C word, the cancer word, but he left us thinking as an audience that whatever was wrong with him, that we believed it was cancer, and that he was seriously ill. So he was in plain sight for a long time. He played us, and it's interesting, as you get older, things that didn't make sense to me at the time. I'll give you an example. I used to do colour pieces, build up to the All-Ireland, just very normal stories. So I wasn't a sports journalist, but sometimes I'd write feature pieces for the news pages about how a town or village was excited, in the run up to the All-Ireland, and there was always rivalry on the border between Tip and Kilkenny, and I'd go into the different areas and get some stories about it, and I'd visit Gowran and I'd visit Kilkenny City, and there were times when, and I thought, wow, DJ Carey was a hero in those parts, and he certainly was. But sometimes when I'd ask about the family, or I'd ask about DJ, I knew I was always missing something. It was like there was something in the air, or that everybody else knew something that I didn't. They might look at each other and look back to me and say, "Oh yeah, DJ's great," I felt like I was out of the loop on something.
Yeah.
And I never knew what that was. But you see, now I realise when I started to investigate this and ask the right questions, people would laugh behind DJ's back. They'd call him Walter Mitty. They'd say he was a fantasist. They'd say extraordinary things about him. But I did not know that when I was working as a reporter for years. A lot of us thought he was straight up, that he was very credible, that he answered the phone, and that he was a nice guy.
Yeah. And like, I'm not sure if you ever read Professor Kevin Dutton's book. It's probably I love the book. It's called Flipnosis, but he pretty much does like, he's a professor of psychology over in, I think it's Cambridge. But he wrote this book pretty much on like con men, salespeople and all that. But in particular, he goes into huge, like, psychics, people that are conning people for a living. And like one of his big findings in the book is, the con is always there. It's normally tapping into some empathy, and it's there to drive urgency. And I think that's what Carey did to an absolute T. Really bad a health issue, which is tapping into the empathy, and then I need to get treatment is the urgency. And that was almost the MO he used to scam so much people. What Dutton also finds in that book is that they tend not to be the smartest people, the con men. But they're incredibly perceptive at reading like any emotional triggers like facial movements, really good at like sniffing out vulnerabilities in others. And again, he was doing that. I know with Mag Kerwin, like when she was going through what he was claiming he was able to weasel in. Like that part in the book was one of the most shocking to me. That he had it was almost the gall and the audacity to a woman that is genuinely going through them mellomas. And he was able to go there and get the money. Like it's so premeditated. And like one of the big things, and this is not to make any kind of claims or anything like that, but there's a thing that pretty much connects like dictators, serial killers, con men. It's this thing called the dark triad. It's like psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and narcissism. And I think them traits, as I was reading your book, I just kept seeing them pop up. Because there's something really psychopathic to be able to look a person in the eye and lie with such confidence and to fraud them. Like I think con men or con artists, con women and con men, are like some of the literally most dangerous people, because it's not like, a killer or something like that maybe, take for example, will maybe, kill someone and they'll probably get caught for the times. It's a massive act and it's brutal and stuff like that. But the con person is constantly, every day, just kind of touching people's lives in a negative way. And there's something so pervasive and sick about it.
Like you've touched on so much there, like the psychology behind this, and it is so interesting. Like I had a lot of questions about DJ. I knew there was stuff going on that I didn't understand at times. I also knew that I needed to give him the benefit of the doubt at times, to help me keep an open mind. And what I mean by that is, it's not that I came to conclusions at the end, but throughout the process I kept coming back to asking questions. Asking questions like, what if he actually is ill? What if he has, because trying to understand medical deception, what's going on here? Could he have Munchausen's, for instance? Or some kind of factitious disorder. So I got in touch with an American forensic clinical psychologist, really helpful guy, great authority on medical deception. He's written books about this, Munchausen's and other factitious disorders. His name is Dr. Mark Feldman. And some of the things you mentioned there, he pointed out to me about, maybe you're looking at an antisocial personality type here, and that's a big umbrella term for things like psychopathy, sociopathy. And he said Eimear prisons are full of people with these kind of antisocial personality types. And he said in the case, now obviously he never examined DJ, he was speaking in general, but he said in cases like this, there are things that will tell you if the person is suffering from an illness like Munchausen or not. And I asked what that would be, and he said, or what are the red flags say if they're not? And he said, well, continual pleas for money. So in the case of DJ Carey, because I went through all the facts of the case with him, he's continuously asking for money. And there were signs there that meticulous planning went into this, that he had to stay many steps ahead to get the money. So all the signs of criminality, in other words, are fraud. That he was a textbook con man. But that's not to say that there wasn't other things going on, like the antisocial personality type or the dark side. And especially for sports stars after they retire. It's very interesting. He talked about, they can be more prone to addiction than the regular guy in the street, because they have to keep the adulation coming. Now, DJ is a guy that since he was a child, he was different and treated differently to his peers. He was brought to the 4-star hotel in Kilkenny, Langtons, for the best efficient stay. To bulk him up for the senior team, other lads had to go home and find a lift, get back in for training, get home, get the homework done, get something quick, wolf down a sandwich, come back, whatever. They didn't want to risk that with DJ, because if he went home, what if he didn't come back for training? Because he was a star player. There were other times, and he said this himself, he touched on some of this in his own documentary, like he'd get a week off school, say if he wasn't feeling well and they were worried he wouldn't make the match, they'd say, sure, just come in for the match and we'll give you a week off next week. There were signs like this. There were also signs that he was malingering. So that's when you feign illness to get out of your obligations or responsibility. So different to Munchausen's, but there was something in it for him. So there was signs that he was feigning illness to get out of his responsibilities, or maybe to dodge for a very long time.
Yeah, and that malingering. And you see that sometimes in court, like when people go to court, they're sick, they can't attend and stuff like that. That malingering is a very real thing. It's a very real thing in the prison system as well, seemingly, with a lot of court appearances. But I suppose, Eimear, maybe to give the listeners like a flavour of some of these cons, because I know they varied in terms, like some were minerals, like which was why, like I suppose the gravity of the con changed from some were. The motivation he was dangling in front of his victims was like almost wealth, like that he was going to come into this deal and they could buy in. And then there was others that it was a full forced empathy attack, kind of around health related issues. So maybe even to give the reader or the listeners just a flavour of what some of these cons were.
So I started to just ask people about his approach. I'd ask them general questions about, look, what did DJ Carey say to you? Did he tell you he was ill? Did he look for money? And very quickly I realised I was grouping these stories, and I could see he had a playbook, and I reckoned that his pitch depended, not always, but generally it would depend on how much money he had in your bank account. He'd run with a different story. So there were also times when he'd just go with a very straightforward, quick hit and ask. It could be something as simple as, I forgot my wallet. So I interviewed people who gave him everything from a tenner up to €120,000 in one, say, go after one ask. So you're talking about at the lower end, he was at a bar at a place that I know, when some of the club members said to me, like he said, I'm fundraising for my cancer, and one fella put his hand in his pocket, gave him £100, right? Then there were other times when there was a huge amount of groundwork that would go in, that he would know people over a long period of time, he would talk to them, there'd be text messages, there'd be calls, he'd start telling them about the treatment. So say in the case of Mag Kerwin, and it was actually Mag's husband Ger that DJ met initially. So he targeted Ger. So Ger is involved as a volunteer with the juveniles, say in his local GA club, and especially over COVID, he remembers it very clearly because the young lads really missed being able to train and all of that. There was restrictions in place. So the night that they were all back out in the field training, great excitement, summer of 2021, Ger heard that DJ was going to attend the session. He was a juvenile ambassador, and they thought, this is great, the young lads are all going to love this. But DJ didn't show any interest in them that night. He did an absolute beeline for Ger, and he approached Ger and said, I hear Mag is sick, and basically from there, I've the same cancer as Mag and all that, and started to talk to Ger, and Ger thought he was really helpful, thought he was lovely, even took his iPhone out, Ger did, and he showed me the notes, he still had them in the phone, where he had written down Fred Hutch, Cancer Centre Seattle, because DJ had given him the name of where he was getting his treatment. He was just, he thought, being sound, being compassionate. There was no ask for money that night. Ger was walking off the field, and again, these little things that don't make sense always at the time, but that come back to you afterwards. He said to the fella he walked off the field with, Jesus, poor DJ, he was telling me there he's the same cancer as Mag, and he thought it odd at the time, but didn't question the man on it. The man said, that's debatable. So there were times maybe when other people were dubious about DJ, but unless you were in the know, you didn't know. So then sometime later anyway, he contacted Ger. The phone call came to Ger first saying he had to go for treatment. His cancer was back. He'd have to go to the United States. That because of his elite handball status, because he had a world title, most of the cost of the treatment was covered, but there was a shortfall, and that he needed $5,000. So that was a story he used when he needed 5 or 10 grand. Now he had a different story if you were a very, very wealthy person in his eyes, if he thought he could get more out of you or extract more. So in the case of businessman Tom Brennan, originally from County Laois, Tom's very successful. DJ was on a Zoom one night with Tom and with people involved in the Laois setup around pandemic time as well. And Tom had been to Kieran's College with DJ, not in the same year, but would have been very much aware of DJ Carey and had great respect for him and everything. And DJ, it seems, certainly knew that Tom was a wealthy man and had maybe asked questions about him, heard about him, and then texted him close to Christmas in 2021. 2020 or 2021, excuse me now, but texted him running up to Christmas and basically asked him was he free for a call. There was a bit of banter about hurling and stuff. Tom said absolutely, so he rang DJ, or DJ rang him. They had a conversation on the phone, and Tom said to me, because I sat down with him and he was very straight up with the facts, and he said, Eimear, he said, the first time that DJ told me what was up, like obviously he said to him, look, he was going to try and help him, but he'd have to discuss it at home with his wife before he could agree to give him. He asked him for 120,000 straight up, and DJ said to him, I'm crying here on the steering wheel with relief, you know, the fact that Tom said he was going to help him. DJ did some things as well that gave people the creeps, you know, certain things he did, like visiting their house, giving them a lot of very detailed information about their treatment. But the pitch to the wealthier person, so to Tom, it wasn't that he was looking for the money, it was that he was looking for a loan, and it was all done above board. Like there was a solicitor contacted, there was a loan agreement drawn up. DJ said he had gotten too much radium from St. James's Hospital in Dublin. Now this is obviously not true, but he said that he had a compo case pending with the HSE, and he was due to get almost 2 million in compensation. And he started to talk about what he was going to do with the money, and he might get some advice on investing it. Tom knew some people that maybe he could talk to afterwards. All this gave loads of detail, but basically that DJ said to Tom, listen, I need 120,000 to settle with the banks, because I'm having issues obviously with the banks. That was in the public domain some years back, that DJ, you know, that there was a debt settlement that needed to be done, and he said he needed to get the banks off his back, have the debt settled so that they couldn't get their hands on his compensation when that would land. So that it was quite elaborate, you know. So if he got the 120, he'd sort everything with the banks, and then they wouldn't be able to get their hands on his compensation money, and he'd pay Tom Brennan back with the compensation money. Now he gave that story to other people as well.
Yeah, and like the book is littered with them sort of stories on all levels of con and values, like you know, different values of money. But like it's such a, like I know at the end of the book and stuff, like they speculate maybe up to 2 million. Like there's a few different figures thrown around, but I cannot, like, because I had Tony O'Reilly on the podcast that we mentioned. And like Tony went through all his story, like he had a gambling addiction. He got so hooked in, and in Tony's words, like when he was on the podcast, the thing that kept pushing him on was this almost hope that he was going to get enough to be able to pay back what he was stealing out of the post office, to feed this gambling habit. Crazy bets, like he gambled 10 million. But I can understand that story, because there was, like, to an extent, because there was a gambling addiction fueling the motivation behind the behaviour. But with Carey, the whole, I was waiting for the end because I was like, okay, he must have a gambling addiction. Maybe, is he on cocaine? Is there something that's fueling it? And we're kind of left with, I still don't understand the motive. Like, have you got any closer, do you think, even after the book came out, to understanding what was fueling this scam? Like, what was the underlying motivation?
DJ definitely has a dark side, and not all the answers are out in the public domain about exactly what he did with the money, but he was robbing Peter to pay Paul for many years, and I found evidence of that. So trying to stay ahead of it, like a pyramid scheme, the pressure he was under at times, because I can understand why the Garda investigation focused on 2013 on, and the bulk of the cases I outline in the book focused from 2010 on. So a man spoke to me that gave him 10 grand in 2010 for treatment abroad. He hadn't said cancer to him, but for going to America for tests. Now, I met guys in the K Club as well that said to me, listen, they couldn't remember, was it 05, was it 06? That DJ was there and he was pointing to marks on the back of his head, talking about brain tumours. His story went from brain tumour to multiple myeloma. It changed over the years, his cancer story. But certainly, this is a very long con. The investigation focused on that period in, say, the last decade or a little bit more, because that's when we started to keep text messages. There's the evidence available, screenshots, emails, all of that. But going back further, I found that fascinating, because certainly he has credibility issues and he's been peddling stories about health for longer than that. So robbing Peter to pay Paul is number one. There's evidence of lots of spending. So there is high life, but there is also low life. And this is what people find really hard to believe, because they're saying, Eimear, sure, he couldn't have spent how could he have spent 2 million? Living in his car on the ring road outside the Hoban Hotel in Kilkenny, and then going in for breakfast hoping someone would pay for it for him. This is a guy, and he would have got over 100 grand from someone some weeks earlier. This stuff is mad. But the thing is, right, it is mad. There's so many contradictions. So when DJ Carey was homeless, he checked into the 5-star Lyrath Hotel in Kilkenny, the Lyrath Estate Hotel, for about 7 weeks. And when I checked that out, he only left a very small bill behind. He paid most of the bill. Now, you can imagine staying in there for 7 weeks, right? Yeah. So he was also at times in the car and going into the locker room in Mount Juliet. He was seen, not your typical homeless person parked outside an exclusive golf resort where he was a corporate member for a while, so he was going in there for the shower to get ready in the morning. So there's evidence of kind of mad stuff as well. There was situationships with women. When DJ himself was confronted by a friend who was helping him, some charitable men kind of rallied around him, and some of them didn't want to believe even what was going on, and they felt very sorry for him. I think their motivation was good. They were trying to help him out, but one of them said to me, Eimear, he's in denial and whatever, and the only bit of truth he ever seemed to get out of him was when he confronted him one time. DJ covered his hands, peered out through his fingers like a child and said, a woman spent it all. So he was deflecting blame at times. Yeah, but he was going around Kilkenny, showing interest in houses, in buying property, had a kind of, he was infatuated by a woman that he was hanging out with as well. So there's all this kind of stuff going on. But to answer your question, there are still things that remain unsaid in the book. But DJ Carey knows exactly where all that money is, and he knows what he did with it. But unfortunately, he's not talking.
And do you know what, maybe, just as you were talking there, maybe I'm thinking about it the wrong way. Maybe the money is the outcome of what the addiction was, and maybe that was just scamming people. There was a thrill in scamming, in the entitlement, or I can get away with this, that I'm more superior, and even though people might have it, I can still squeeze money out of people. I can still peddle this story. There's still maybe that's where the addiction, or maybe that's where the thrill or whatever he was seeking came from. Because for something to sustain that behaviour, we know from so much behavioural psychology that behaviour, to keep doing behaviour, there has to be a big reward. We know this from all the Skinnerian conditioning and stuff. There has to be a reward. And I don't know if the reward was the money or if it was the thrill of it. But only DJ maybe knows that.
Yeah, but the psychologist had also pointed out, you're right, like the things you said there, that sometimes people do get a kick out of it, out of the deception. That there is something there, certainly, especially if you think of DJ Carey. The times when I had empathy for him and felt sorry for him, when there was a lot of people sniggering and sneering about him for years, basically telling him he was a great fella, but behind his back kind of making him out to be a fucking idiot, to be honest with you, a Walter Mitty
Yeah.
type character. There was a lot of that going on. And did DJ Carey think that, I'll show them? I don't know. The fact that he honed in on people who he admired. He talked a lot about how much he admired the businessman Dennis O'Brien.
Yeah.
Did he get a kick out of deceiving him? Did it make him feel clever? These are things that I'd say a psychologist would certainly have insight on what's there. But he found he it seemed like compulsive as well. He was really rampant in terms of being everywhere, defrauding people in recent times before his arrest. So, and even in court we heard really interesting detail about when the Gardaí honed in on him and when they were about to arrest him for the first time. That was kind of the only time when they got real honesty from him, that there was a level of cooperation and that he confessed what was going on. So it was like he had been at it for so long that it just everything came to a head. Now, people in my community, like I was working as a local journalist in KCLR up until May 2023. So he had been, came to the attention of the Gardaí around the previous Christmas. So like I was hearing so much from 2022 on. I mean, people were coming to me saying, Eimear, why is he in there? Why is he in the Lord Bagnall Inn sitting at table 17, 18 every day? He'd sit there with his back to the wall, he'd have a pot of tea. Then I had relations even contact me saying he's in our local golf club. What's he doing there with a laptop out, talking to people every day? They just thought he was odd. It was odd. And I said, sure, look, at the time, maybe he's back living local. He was living in Kilkenny from 2021. Maybe he's working, maybe he's whatever. And they were like, no, it's very odd. He's spending hours and hours there and he's telling people about things, about like his treatment, and he's asking for money. So there was a lot of different things going on. I didn't connect the dots immediately. I was in a queue for a coffee in Kilkenny and Connolly's Red Mills one day. It's beside TJ Reid's gym. There'd be a lot of people coming and going.
Yeah.
I overheard conversations at times there as well, where we'd say, and a woman pulled me aside one day and just said to me, listen, what's Carey at, and kind of colourful language, even stronger language than that, like what's he at? And I said, oh, what do you mean? And he owes money all over town. And I think things got much harder for DJ Carey in terms of his fraud after the prime time on RT about his sister Katrina, because once that story aired in February 2022, there was a lot of heat then on the family in general. And people started to ask questions. What if he's at something similar to her because he was borrowing money and not paying it back?
Yeah. And you have it in the book as well, where I think at one stage was he hanging around, or like, and this I think maybe a bit earlier in the days, but going around like in the treatment groups and seeing how people behaved. Like this was such a long play, but then I get the feeling when he was, because he was always in drinking the pot of tea by the sounds of it, that he was scoping out his victims, and like
he was researching all the time. He was researching illness. He was hanging around in waiting rooms. He was talking to sick people. If you tell him, for instance, I know in cases where somebody says relative had multiple myeloma, he begged to go and see that person. He says, I'll go see them, and he had hit this person, this friend of his, for 5,000, and when he found out that the friend's relation had multiple myeloma, the friend didn't really want him coming to the house and all that, but he said, Eimear, he, like the ghoulish details he gave at the house, he insisted on going. Your man thought, maybe he's being nice or whatever, but the good china was taken out, the whole lot. Now that person subsequently died of multiple myeloma, so you can imagine how that family feels for bringing him in. and listening to all of his details. And up until the very end, when the relation died, that relation was asking, how's DJ? They were really upset by the whole thing, thinking he had multiple myeloma.
Yeah, that's where it's just probably one of the grossest scams, like them health scams.
And he didn't always ask for money. This is interesting as well. There were times when he just was rehearsing the story, maybe. So I know a woman that was playing 9 holes golf in Gorn one day. Now, she was out practicing for a match, so she was playing on her own. And I actually know this woman very well. And she said to me, Jesus, Eimear, did you hear that DJ Carey has cancer? And this was a good while back. And, you know, lots of people heard different things about his health over the years. But she said that she was out to practice. And he came along and said, oh, do you mind, will we team up? Because we're both playing on their own. And she said, yeah, no problem. And she said that he was lovely, and they did, and in the space of a couple of holes, he had told her so much detail about his illness, but he never asked for money.
But that's it, seeding. Yeah, and that's it, probably practicing. Like, I know, actually, that's just after sparking something in my head. You have a part in the book as well where he sparked up a friendship, we don't know how, with this guy who went under the moniker, I think, Tom the Con. To be a fly on the wall there through them conversations, because he was a bona fide con man, like a lot of convictions for it.
Fraudster, yeah. Fascinating as well. It's interesting you picked up on that. It's only a couple of paragraphs in the book. But Thomas McLaughlin, when DJ was living in an apartment that I believe was being generously given to him to live in for a period of time, for about 15 months, by Dennis O'Brien, the businessman, and it was around Wellington House, around very affluent area of Ballsbridge in Dublin. DJ would often be seen hanging out with this convicted fraudster, Thomas McLaughlin. They'd go for a bit of grub in Searson's pub on Bagot Street. They'd call into each other's apartments for tea, this kind of thing. But there appeared to be a falling out at one stage, and it was, some of the neighbours noticed that they went from being bosom buddies at one stage to DJ being furious with Tom about something and checking the letterbox and all this kind of thing. So I'm not sure what led to the relationship breaking down, but Thomas McLaughlin himself, he was the subject of a Liveline campaign at one stage when Joe Duffy was putting a call out across the country for stories about him, because he was leaving lots of bills unpaid behind him, staying in B&Bs, having a nice time, having his dinner and the whole lot, and leaving bills unpaid behind him. So the law caught up with Tom the Con. So you just wonder what himself and DJ were doing hanging out together, if they were trading stories or what they were at. Yeah,
trading skill sets even, or like ideas, or what the falling out was over. Did one get the one up on the other? We can only speculate.
You'd wonder, but DJ was busy as well. Like, he had so many friendships around the country, acquaintances, like not very close friends, I would say, but people maybe sometimes had thought they were friends with DJ, but maybe DJ wasn't very good to them. But women as well, his relationships with women, and I think that some of I've met some really courageous people, and some of them were in relationships with DJ Carey. Situationships even, I call them at times, because they felt compelled to stay but didn't necessarily want to stay always, but they thought they were with a dying man. They thought he was dying of cancer, so there was a lot of guilt attached to that kind of situationship that they were in.
And they weren't off limits either. Like, I think there was no one really off limits. Like, if there was that's what I find. I think it's a Jane where he was like, when they first met, he even told her like he was terminal, and did he get 6,000 leading up to his mum's funeral? That was like, and it wasn't even a word of thanks. It was just, is it sent you?
Is that AIB to AIB was his regular text?
That was it, yeah.
Because he had an AIB account, so the money would land instantly if it was sent AIB to AIB. He'd give her the cold shoulder if it was Bank of Ireland to AIB, for instance, or a different account, because it was always about the money. And even after Tom Brennan transferred a big substantial amount of money to him as well, same thing, is that AIB to AIB, can you screenshot that when it's sent? This is how he interacted with people around the money.
Yeah, and sometimes when maybe the gig was up, and people kind of caught on to him, they were dropped so
Yeah.
quickly. Like they were so disposable. People were just like they were almost objects to just bleed dry and then move on. And there was always someone else, because as we said, he was kind of hanging around like in maybe these circles like golf clubs, where maybe there's a bit more affluence there. There's more targets anywhere, sitting down in cafes, and he had that celebrity appeal. Like that's the thing. Like I was trying to wonder throughout it, would like if he wasn't, I'd just say he was a good hurler, but why didn't maybe achieve the same stardom? Would the con have still happened, but just it wouldn't have been amplified as much because he wouldn't have had the maybe celebrity status that he had, because that really amplified it, just turned up the volume to max, really. But would them traits have been in him as well? Because he did hold down a job, like had good sales job. Like I just
He had
don't
legit
understand.
earnings.
Yeah.
He had so many different things on the go. When you think about it, because I started kind of almost add up the legit money, thinking he was making a fairly all right living. He was making a decent living. For coaching sessions, typically, like somebody not even at his level could get €200 for an hour of a coaching session, right?
Yeah.
But he had a job with the IT Carlo hurlers, and he did a very good job there, coaching. He had a column at one stage. A lot of this was maybe through his links with Dennis O'Brien. He had a column with the Mirror, where they'd use his image, and somebody else, I'd presume, was ghostwriting it for him. He was an analyst with Off the Ball. He only had to answer his phone. He was going to get a couple of grand a month, this kind of thing. So there was lots of legit money coming to him. Brand ambassador for Topaz. He ended up getting a job as a sales rep at one stage with Let's, a company in Wexford. He worked for a good while with Bunzl McLaughlin, a company in Northern Ireland. So in recent years, we'd say he was with Bunzl for a few years. He got a corporate membership in Mount Juliet. So he had legit earnings. It's not that. And also a lot of people said to me, they'd give him a job as a sales rep, no problem, because doors would open for him. Publicans would be glad to see him. The likes of the drinks company he was working for. He was so well known that it would be easy enough for him if he just turned up. But he wasn't always diligent and good at turning up. He'd soon turn to excuses, and there'd be reasons why he wasn't always in work.
Yeah. And there's instances in the book, and this is why sometimes I think, was money the motivating force? Because he wouldn't ask for money for actual, turning up to appearances and all that. He didn't want a penny. So it's like, was money the thing, or was it the thrill of the con? Because that's the thing. I can't wrap my head around.
He liked money. He definitely liked money as well. Say there could have been the two things, but he didn't like charging clubs, or he'd be trying to. But then again, he did so much for people when he waved the hand and said the cup of tea is fine, and he presented the medals and all that. But he went back to many of those people years later, and he called in favours. So if you take like Bernie Comiskey in Westmeath, he was very good to Bernie years back in the 1990s when he was married to Christine. They went up to Mullingar, where Bernie had a sports club at the time. DJ offered to open. Bernie had a lot of sports memorabilia, and he decided to open a little kind of gallery in the squash club where he put all the memorabilia on the walls and stuff, and DJ came down to officially open it for him. It was a very popular sports gym. He was running a ladies only gym in Mullingar before anybody else was doing it and all that. So he had a friendship with DJ over the years, because he did this gig for him and he didn't want to charge him for it. Bernie brought him out for dinner with his wife and had them stay in the house, and DJ was really insistent. At the end, Bernie wanted to pay him just even his expenses, and DJ was like, wouldn't hear tell of it. He said, no, you put us up and we had a lovely time and everything. And actually Bernie said, he just put a small amount of cash into an envelope and had to actually throw it through the window on DJ's ex-wife's side of the car, because DJ just wouldn't hear of it, wouldn't take it. But then years later, the call came in to Bernie, that DJ was sick, and he looked for money from him, and he wasn't happy when he didn't get as much as he thought he should have got from Bernie. Bernie ended up giving him a cheque for €1,000, but DJ was expecting a lot more than that.
Wow. So that's,
And Bernie's a pensioner, very decent guy, very lovely guy. He also offered with his son Ian to pay for all of DJ's treatment because he had made some calls to Kilkenny and he had found out maybe that he should look into things, maybe scrutinise them a bit closer. So his son as well had said, look, hold off on giving him the $5,000 because DJ wanted at least $5,000 and kind of hold off for now. And Bernie even wanted to give him $3,000, and it was his son really that slowed all that down and said to him, look, let's just wait and see, let's offer to pay for his treatment, because they knew that the treatment DJ was talking about, they couldn't understand why he was going all the way to Seattle when it was available. Like, it was available in Europe, it was available in Ireland, but his son Ian had a link to a private hospital in Spain and had apartments there and was willing to put him up, willing to fund the treatment, but DJ wasn't interested.
Yeah, and Bernie couldn't understand that as well. But what you mentioned there, what comes up repeatedly in the book, is that people say someone rings someone and hold off or don't give him money, or
wouldn't be wise
stay
to give
far
that lad
away.
money. Yeah,
So,
stay
like,
away from
it's
that
like-
fella. These phrases.
Do you know what it reminded me of in a very complete different context? But it was like that, you know, when the Harvey Weinstein broke, and everyone kind of, there was all this hush underpinning and undercurrents that everyone knew there was something, you know, disgusting and nefarious going on. And, you know, it was allowed go on for years before the kind of story broke, and like in a complete different context. But there was this like hush kind of whispers, I get the sense, that went on for years, but it didn't really, you know, nothing happened. It was just, oh, stay away from him, or he'll never pay you back, or don't give him a penny. Like, how didn't it break sooner, I suppose, do you think?
This is absolutely baffling to me. Like, I really don't get it, right? So I was thinking about it as a Venn diagram. So there were people that knew some things but didn't know everything. So if I even think myself, there were things that, you know, there were times when things didn't always add up about DJ, but I didn't have the insights I have now. There were sometimes things that didn't quite make sense, but it depended on where you were nearly in that Venn diagram. Were you involved in the GA, maybe in business, maybe have some connection to the banks as well? There was an inner circle of people, especially men, that were very aware of what DJ Carey was like. Now, that's not to say they knew that he was getting money for cancer, but they certainly knew that he was up to no good, and they were suspicious of him, and they were warning people not to give him money. There was also some decent people that had twigged that he just wasn't an honest person. So I'd always ask people who I was in contact with, you know, say if they said to me, DJ Carey told me he was ill and he wanted money and I refused, and I'd say, why did you refuse? And sometimes they'd say, well, I got a call, or I put a call into, and they'd name some individuals. So there were some people that certainly warned others off. But even in terms of, say, the county board in Kilkenny, sometimes the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. So there may have been individuals that had absolutely no idea what was going on, but there may have been other individuals that had concerns and that were able to tip some people off to stay away from him. So it's just interesting how nervous people are as well, and it's understandable in a way. And Sarah Newman referred to this herself. People were kind of saying, well, why didn't she come forward years ago when she knew that he was peddling his cancer story? And she said that she reported him to Gardaí after the breakup. We don't know the details of exactly what she reported, but I'd imagine it would be very difficult to come out against DJ Carey at the height of his fame in 2012. He was like a god, and there were all these god-like references and comparisons to him. Like, you know, just...
You like, there's one fascinating insight I think it's toward the end of the book as well, and I think you draw a quote out from, is it Tony Griffin, and he says, you know, people that aren't into hurling will only see the criminal, and like you can kind of conversely nearly reverse engineer the opposite to that as well, that, you know, the people who can't see the criminal, they can just see the hurler. And I think that's one of the things that probably maybe weren't able. And like, here's another thing, Eimear, as well. Like, you have to be filled with confidence and solid data to be able to say you don't have cancer, you're lying. Like, I could never imagine myself saying that, because number one, I'd never think someone would lie about it. But as well, it's really hard to disprove someone has.
It's really
doesn't have
difficult.
cancer.
And for
really
the media, it's the one thing that the media find really hard to substantiate. Anything to do with your health, because you can't go. A doctor can't say be your source that stacks that up. If the horse's mouth is saying he's ill,
Yeah.
you have to accept that as a journalist because doctor-patient confidentiality. So it is a very difficult one. Definitely.
So hard to falsify, see. Like, and the thing is, as I know, it's at the towards the start of the book anyway, or kind of maybe mid a third of the way through. There's where I think he sue someone for 125k defamation, a journalist.
He
Like,
did.
were you kind of worried then around, how do I write this? Well, actually, maybe the question is for you. Like, were you worried, like, personally, like, people like maybe fanatical, or I'm going to get bad looks, or someone might scratch me car for writing this about DJ, number one. And then number two, were you worried, like, anything, if he sued for defamation and before, like, to try get everything as to the letter of the law nearly?
Absolutely, Gary. Like,
Yeah, I
being
can
honest,
imagine.
it's the number one thing that journalists in Ireland worry about every time you do a controversial story or a story about anything like this. You need to check and recheck everything to be accurate, because the defamation and contempt laws in Ireland are so stringent. So it's a massive concern. Absolutely, and for publishers as well, it is. So this is why there are sometimes frustrations, and there are sometimes questions you can't answer in a publication. You go and you put as much as you can in, but ultimately, if there's balls in the air, there's reasons why you can't put every piece of information in.
Yeah. And so when did you first, like, because I know you mentioned there you were hearing, like, kind of back chatter and stuff like that. When did you decide then, okay, I'm going to write this book, there's a big story here?
It's kind of funny because a couple of things were happening. I didn't know I was going to write a book. I thought I thought I was working on some kind of maybe because I was working in the radio at the time as well, and I thought maybe this would end up being maybe a radio documentary or something. So at the very start, I didn't know how it was going to end up. I just knew, and because of actually, funny you mentioned libel, defamation, all of that, because of those concerns, I knew that this was a story I couldn't broadcast at that time when I started hearing about it. But instead of saying no to people, I can't because my hands are tied or whatever, I started saying yes to meeting them. And I knew what they had to say was really important for some reason. And I explained to them, I can't let any of this out right now because he's under investigation. He's about to be charged. We've allowed due process. But I would like to meet you. And do you know anyone else that has been tapped by DJ or has had interactions? And one person would lead to another person, would lead to another person. And I started to gain kind of people's trust and build a relationship with them. But I was just meeting people about the story. Initially, it was just showing an interest. It was nothing formal. I wasn't even always recording it. I was just getting names and taking down some notes. But then as things moved on, I realised, I think there really is something here. And I started to pay much closer attention. And then I started to think, okay, how am I going to get this information out there? When am I going to get this information out there? So I was very honest to my sources. I said, like, it might be a while before we can publish this or before we can broadcast this or before we can do anything with this. And then around the same time, I was becoming more open to, I was very frustrated with the churn in media all the time. Always loved my job in local radio and in papers and everything, but you're churning out stuff all the time and you don't get time to dig properly on one story. So when I was working on this, I was doing it after work. That's the strange thing, because you wouldn't have time to do it in work because you're batting away so many different stories. So I'd meet people like at lunch or in the evening, or I'd ring them in the evenings, things like this, meet them at the weekends, all of that stuff. Then I have a friend who's a sports journalist in Kilkenny, and he had said to me that there was a publisher asking about DJ Carey, and actually the publisher came to me. I know that the publisher had approached some sports journalists, but it's really a story for a news journalist because there's so much digging involved. And the publisher came to me. Marion Press was a guy that worked for them at the time. He's moved on since. Really nice guy. Patrick O'Donoghue was the commissioning editor, and he's an interest in the GA, and he he talked to me and he realised I had a lot of information about DJ, say from when he was in business and from when he was with Sarah Newman, just from my work with the Indo years ago. So then at that stage, it's like the universe sent it to me almost. I didn't know where I was going with it initially.
Yeah, and that's so I suppose that's the bread and butter though, really, journalism work where you can get to do like really deep investigative work. Like, must have been so fulfilling almost writing that, where it's not, as you say, like kind of the more churn stories, very topical, let's get it out, where it was deep. Like, how many years were you writing it?
Like, to be really honest with you, Gary, it was like a pain in the arse, and I'm not making that up. It wasn't something I enjoyed, and I know I probably should say I did not. This is one of the first stories I can honestly say I really did not enjoy this story. This was a weird story. My head was melted a lot of the time. People close to me were fed up with it because it was going on for a long time.
I know.
Now, I just knew it was important because there were so many rumours, and I was curious. I was, and the motivation was I wanted to find out what was going on, because I thought, I suppose it's the fascination, maybe the reason you do the podcast in some ways, or the reason anyone gets fascinated by that darker thing. Like, what's driving him? What's he actually up to? What if it's not what we think? I had a lot of questions. And because in Kilkenny there was always drama around DJ, there was always rumours, I was thinking back to years and years ago about stories from my 20s and going, with hindsight, things look different. And I wanted to go into the archives and dig to find out, but strangely now, didn't actually enjoy it. It was just a job that I needed to do.
Yeah, and I suppose you're like with the victims, that's going to be a somber enough interview, because people are after being scammed, and like I can imagine there's so much different emotions there. There's maybe a bit of shame, embarrassment, and all that. But like the thing is with them, because I've had a lot of cult survivors on as well, and I had he's like the world's kind of top culty programmer. So he goes in. He actually did a big case in Ireland. We couldn't go into it, but up and loud. But he goes in and he's hired by the family, and they're coming to get their husband, their daughter, their son out of these cults. And what he was saying, because I was like, how do you fall for the cults? And he really corrected me. He was like, you never go at the victims. It's the predators that come in and sell their story, because there's a lot of similarities with what DJ was doing, and kind of how people fall into cults, and them cult kind of leaders, the way they manipulate. I had a girl on last week, the episode's not out yet, but she survived that family cult, that one in America, the Children of God. You might have heard of it, but it was a desperate, it's the sexual abuse of kids, from such an early age. It was really heartbreaking, actually, conversation. But where she was with it is that the cults are just extracting free labour, because they were out trying to drum up money for the cult leader, out singing in the streets, doing all this, and it was all just extraction of free labour just to get money. And there's such kind of parallels with what DJ was doing. It's just extracting money out of people.
Out of really decent people, because he's not an ordinary con man. That's the thing.
Yeah.
He's somebody that honed in on people who loved him, people who adored him. So he used his reputation, and that was another thing that really motivated me to look into this, because I thought, it's much harder when it's your hero. It's harder to believe what's going on, and I felt very sorry for the victims as well, because imagine being from Kilkenny and being asked by the Gardaí to make a statement about DJ Carey, the great DJ Carey, with his 5 All-Ireland medals. We do not forget the feeling he gave people when he scored those goals. That really happened. I've talked to fans that said, no journalist, no prosecutor would ever give me the feeling he gave me. There was nurses even in St. Luke's that said to me, listen, we remember a time when people would they were nearly bed-riddled, and they'd be able to get out of the bed with the joy, when the goals were scored. He did incredible things. So for victims to have to actually, and they didn't turn on Carey. The Gardaí started to investigate him because a suspicious transaction was flagged by a bank. So a vulnerable person was about to transfer money into DJ Carey's account. The banks alerted the guards. The guards sought his bank statements. And in his bank statements, they could see the names of all of these people, like Mag Kerwin, like Tom Brennan, like Tommy Butler, that had transferred huge sums of money across to Carey. So they went to those people and they asked them, why did you give him money? And they said they did so on the basis he had cancer. And the Gardaí then told them he didn't have cancer, that he was in fact in good health, that he'd never been to the United States for treatment. So it was very hard on the victims at that stage, because up until the last minute, because of the level of detail he went into, especially say in Tommy Butler's case, this is a guy who was great friends with DJ Carey, as he thought, for years. He had a photograph in his hallway of DJ with his daughter and with his niece, a treasured photograph. He had a Hurley with DJ had signed. He had shared many rounds of golf with him over the years. They had selfies together. There was so many text messages. Tommy said to me, I couldn't believe that he didn't have cancer. Like, just no way. And I said, and how did the Gardaí convince you to make a statement? And you know that, he said, I would only give the statement if they gave me a written categorical reassurance that DJ Carey never had cancer.
Wow.
So that's how trusting people were of Carey. So I did feel sorry for the victims, because I thought they were vulnerable. They had, because this guy was an icon in Kilkenny. So for them to come out, but they were very, very brave people. They weren't trying to, make a name for themselves or to in any way get DJ Carey in any kind of trouble. He brought all that world pain onto himself. Yeah.
And that's why I think the book was so aptly named as well. It's The Great Betrayal, because, talking about Tommy there, like, that's such a betrayal.
It was grooming.
DJ wouldn't. Yeah, it was. That's the word. That is the word for it, which makes it even kind of more despicable, because, and he knew, like, the people, he had this kind of adulation of a lot of these people, that their cognitive defences were a bit more down, like, because you could probably never imagine someone would lie like that, and about cancer, like, it's like, Jesus, like, I'd be so superstitious, like, even reading the book I was like, whoa, just the way he was able to do it. But I suppose before we finish up and all, Eimear, like, one of the things that was so I found it hard to understand is where he was when he was telling all these people, like, he was, I'm in Seattle for a week and stuff. Like, now I know in some cases, like, especially I think it was when he was with Jane, some of her friends were, or maybe it wasn't Jane, it could have been one of the other girls.
Yeah.
Alison. Her friends were seeing him in the K Club and seeing him around, and so. But was he in apartments? Was he in hotels? Do we know where he kind of was hanging around?
Do you know, there were times when he was just lying low, and this is going to sound mad, but there are some things I didn't put in the book because there just was so much information, but something that someone had mentioned to me, and it's not in the book, he never put up a Christmas tree. He never wanted Christmas lights visible in his apartment. He used to always tell people around Christmas time he was going to Seattle for treatment. So unless he was sitting in darkness a lot of the time, he didn't appear to be very far from home, but there were times when the house he was renting or the apartment he was renting was in absolute darkness for weeks at a time. So it's very strange, and the word that always came up about DJ when I talked to people who were in intimate relationships with him, odd. He was a very odd man. He would visit friends as well in the west of Ireland and different corners of Ireland, and he'd stay with them for a couple of weeks here and a couple of weeks there, maybe when he was saying he was going abroad, but also he'd sit at times with the lights off. And there were times when he was under pressure as well. There was bailiffs calling to the house when he was in debt, this kind of thing.
Wow, so, kind of paints a grim picture, doesn't it? Just kind of, con man just sitting maybe on a couch in darkness. Like, I just, again, baffling. I think I said that at the start of it. Bewilderment, jaw-dropping, and is probably akin to, like, a Tom Brady, the American quarterback, going around and, like, Netflix, a big documentary you'd see on him scamming all these people in America. It has that magnitude here in Ireland. Like, it really does.
It's just hard to believe. It's hard to believe that he's in jail now. He was sentenced to 5.5 years. How he's in a small cell in Mountjoy prison. And this was a guy that he had the Prime Minister of Ireland, the Taoiseach at the time, Bertie Ahern, launched his DVD. He was on our biggest chat shows. Everybody wanted a piece of him. He was just huge. Like, he had his lunch with Tiger Woods, as we mentioned earlier. He was very friendly with very wealthy Americans. He knew Brian Kelly, the American college's football coach. Met Brian when he came to Ireland. A lot of people were in awe of DJ Carey, and we were blinded by him because he had the hero status. But it is a sad end to see how things have gone. It's particularly very sad for the people that he was close to, the people that he betrayed, and for his family as well.
Yeah, and just from anything I've seen and read, like, it doesn't seem to be much contrition. Like, so when I know we mentioned Tony O'Reilly, and they are very different cases, but like Tony, stole that money, it was a gambling, but he was on the podcast, like, he's dedicated his life now to trying to help gamblers. He's very contrite, he knows that he did wrong, has served his time, has done all that, and has gone on now to try to grow awareness and to help people maybe that would get into the same scenario he's got himself into. And look, I know DJ's only gone in, but from anything I really seen, it doesn't seem like contrition. Like, he doesn't seem to have taken, and maybe he will come to this, but he doesn't seem to have taken responsibility for the emotional harm, not just the financial, but the emotional harm he's done. Like, we know from when Bernie Madoff died, and people, like, some people are like, oh, it's just scam, and he was scamming rich people and stuff like that. 2 people committed suicide there. Like, 2 lives were lost in that scam. Some people were never able to go back. They were so old, and they had to go back into the workforce. Like, incredible harm. I know we see them as non-violent crimes, and in my opinion, actually 5.5 years is too little, because I think the harm that does to people is incredible. It's not just like a punch to the face harm, or it's leaving a few bruises or cuts. It's deep psychological and emotional harm done to people, and I don't think I haven't seen any contrition.
No, I haven't, and I wanted to give DJ opportunity. So I contacted him many times. The only feedback I ever got from him was he blocked me off social media. I texted him, I called him, I wrote to him by registered post. I spoke to him the day that he appeared in court, the day he pleaded guilty. I gave him space as well, because you have to allow due process. But once he pleaded guilty, I went up to him, and he was in a huddle with his team, with his solicitor. I approached him through his solicitor as well, and the national media were that day said to DJ's right, and I said to DJ, let's take a walk, and I moved to the left, and he looked, and he wanted to get away, and I said, keep walking, because if you turn right, you're going to walk straight into the national media, who are waiting for you, and they're going to run down the street after you now when I'm finished. But I was giving him his right of reply. So I talked to him about some of the allegations that were in the book that we now know are true. I talked to him about some of the things that people were saying about him. I said, DJ, if there is another side, I really need to hear it now. It's very important that if you are sorry, that you have a chance to say that, But his jaw was clenched, his body language was aggressive, in that aggressively shut down, you might say, like that if there was any emotion there, it was that he was very unhappy with the situation and didn't want to talk about it, just wanted me to go away, I would imagine, but did not say one word. And we walked all around the court, we came down the staircase together. He had to take a lot of steps with me trotting along beside him, saying to him, please DJ, is there context I'm missing? Is there something I'm missing that explains what you were doing? And there was nothing. Yeah.
Which again is just a complete lack of contrition and responsibility for his actions.
He could have submitted a letter to the court. There was no obligation for him to speak to me as a journalist. He didn't have to do that, by the way, but there were other ways that he could have showed contrition to the victims. He could have reached out to them in some way. He didn't. And that's hard because, remember, these are people that are known to him. One of the victims that was named in court, not one of the victims I'd interacted with a number of them that were on the court list, but also I interacted with many that weren't and that will never go to the Gardaí or make a statement. Some of them gave him cash. There's different reasons why they don't want to be identified as well. But in the cases before the court, there was one, even a cousin of DJ's, that DJ targeted at his father's funeral. And DJ's parents themselves, both of his parents died of cancer.
Yeah. Oh, I suppose time will tell, like, you know, of prison. I know definitely the Irish model is geared more towards you know, actually reforming individuals. You know, it's not like you know, the punishment system that we see in the US. So maybe like that time, you know, it'd probably be out maybe 2.5. But yeah, I think probably the chapter isn't fully closed on that, yeah, because he's still, you know, young enough, and he was born in 1970, so he probably still has a good few years and where it goes, and if, you know,
he has a life ahead of him as well.
Yeah.
So like what he does, or how he moves, I suppose, will he rehabilitate himself? We'll just have to see what happens in the future. Yeah,
definitely. So, like, just to all the listeners, there is so much in this book. I think I was saying to you off camera, Eimear, it's probably one of the, like, for non-fiction, it's probably just one of the best researched books I've read. Just an incredible account from everything from, I suppose, the early beginnings, the hurling career, and right up to all the scams, everything. Really good. I actually had the audiobook as well, and I'm really happy you did it in your voice, because I just think it's so much more authentic. So even for some of the listeners that just want to hear it, I definitely recommend it. It's really good. I think around, what was it, 8 hours, maybe 8-9 hours of just quality.
God help you, Gary, listening to my voice for that long. the Carlow accent, but I really appreciate the feedback. Thanks.
Yeah, so I'm going to put the link down for the Amazon and the Audible link as well, if people do want to listen. If you're on the go, sometimes it's easier. But look, Eimear, thanks so much for coming on and sharing all that context. You know, I think I've said it so many times, just jaw-dropping story. And you just did a really good, I think, service to the victims. You know, getting all that out there, and just to shine a spotlight on an awareness that, you know, there is individuals like this. That's kind of a lot of the ethos behind this podcast. It shines a light on the darkness sometimes, but I think that book does just a stellar job in documenting the whole case.
Thank you so much, and I'm going back to find your episode on Tony 10, another fascinating story. Yeah, definitely. Look, Eimear, thanks so much for coming on. To all the listeners, them 2 links will be down there. Honestly, I couldn't recommend them more. Thanks everyone for listening, and thanks a million, Eimear. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks a million, Gary.